Good morning and welcome to all the officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and of course, ExporTT Limited. On behalf of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, we warmly welcome you all. My name is Wade Mark, Chairman of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. Our mandate is to consider and report to the House of Representatives on the following: the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of all enterprises that are owned or controlled by or on behalf of the state. The Auditor General's report on any such accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements, and of course, whether policy is carried out efficiently, effectively, and economically, and whether expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it. Now, the purpose of our meeting of this committee is to conduct an examination of the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of ExporTT Limited for the financial year 2018, and to do a follow-up on the implementation of recommendations contained in the committee's 28th report when we had the 11th Parliament. Our committee is desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at ExporTT Limited, and this is in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to these challenges. The role of our committee is to help ExporTT Limited improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. Now, our meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM, and of course the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, X, that is former Twitter, @ttparliament. At this time, I would like to invite our members who are here to formally introduce themselves, starting on my immediate far left.
Thank you very warmly, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very warmly, Mr. Chairman. I am Fitzgerald Ethelbert Hines, member.
Good morning all and welcome. Laurel Lizama Leasing, member.
May I ask my colleague?
Hi, Stephen McClatchy, member.
Hi, good morning. Rushton Parry, Vice Chairman.
Thank you all. May I now extend that said courtesy to our specially invited officials from the three entities, Let me begin by asking the representatives in the following order rather, to introduce themselves. Firstly, the Ministry of Finance, to be followed by the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and finally, ExporTT, in that order. Ministry of Finance.
Good morning. I'm Melba Issa, Senior Business Analyst, Investments Division, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning. Chintamani Suku, Acting Director, Social and Economic Transformation.
Ministry of Trade and Industry, please.
Good morning, Chairman, members. Randall Karim, Permanent Secretary.
Good morning to the Chairman and members. Candice Lackinsing, Director of Strategy, Business Facilitation and Program Management.
Good morning, members. Neville Alexander, Assistant Director of Trade, Development and Promotion, Ministry of Trade.
Anyone else on trade? No? Let's deal with the officials from ExporTT, please.
Good morning, Chairman and members. Danaraj Hariprasad, General Manager, Client Services, ExporTT.
Good morning, Chairman and members. Maria Padella Benjamin, General Manager, Operations, ExporTT.
Good morning, Chairman, members. Mark Jardine, Director.
Good morning, members and Chairman. Kessan Coker, Manager, Finance and Investments.
Good morning, members. Anand Rambaran, Finance Consultant.
May I at this time invite the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Trade and Industry to make a brief opening statement, please.
All right, good morning again, Chairman, on members of this committee. First, let me express my gratitude to the committee for inviting the Ministry of Trade to participate in this meeting aimed at, in essence, examining the operations of ExporTT. I think all members would appreciate, and in fact, all members of the national community viewing would appreciate that trade, and particularly the export of goods and services, is important for a vital and healthy economy. We at the Ministry of Trade and Industry view ExporTT as a critical state enterprise under our ministry in helping the ministry to achieve its mandate to do exactly that, to develop trade, and in particular, the increasing the exports of goods and services. We work closely with ExporTT to not only do that, but also to strengthen the wider business sector. And in so doing, we appreciate the need for greater efficiency and, more importantly, accountability. The ministry is therefore heavily invested in ensuring that ExporTT not only performs well, but that they do so in an efficient and transparent manner. And in this regard, we are happy to contribute to the deliberations of the committee this morning.
Yes, thank you so very much, Mr. Karim. And may I now invite Mr. Suku? No, Mr. Harry Prasad, rather, my apologies, of ExporTT Limited to make a brief opening statement. Please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. As the National Export Facilitation Organization of Trinidad and Tobago, our board, management, and staff are committed to achieving our mandate of growing non-energy exports in Trinidad and Tobago. In the past 3 years, efforts have been increased through our Export Booster initiative and closer collaborations with the private sector through agencies like the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association and the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, particularly in the area of trade missions. These collaborated efforts have ensured that trade missions leaving the country are on an almost monthly basis and that there are no duplication of efforts in executing them. The Export Booster Initiative also provides a number of capacity building programs and grants that have allowed companies to improve their export readiness by increasing their scale, meeting quality and entry requirements for regional and extra-regional markets. During the national budget presentation in October 2021, it was announced that ExporTT will be part of an amalgamated entity with InvestTT and CreativeTT in the first instance, with other entities to follow. The organization also went through a change management process over the period April 2021 to March 2022, where a number of structural and process changes were completed to move the organization from a task-oriented one to a customer service-oriented. Some of the key changes in this exercise included a new organizational structure, brand strategy, review of the performance management system, and an interim strategy to account for the period between the end of our strategic plan 2018-2022 and the strategy that would guide this new entity. These have had a significant impact on the company's operations when coupled with the increased number of projects under the Export Booster Initiative, which has added not only trade missions, but the capacity building initiatives that were mentioned before. Given all that is happening in the organization, the board, management, and staff are still able to accomplish more than it has in the history of the organization, making significant rounds on our targets set out for our corporate KPIs. Just over 5 million in export orders were recorded in the last fiscal as a direct result of the company's activities. This is largely understated in our opinion, as we still try to gather more information from our exporters. The organization is constantly improving the way we operate and the level of service we provide. And we look forward to the deliberations this morning, as they can only help us in our further improvement.
Thank you. Can I call on Ms. Suku to make a brief statement at this time?
Thank you, Chair. The Investment Division of the Ministry of Finance is responsible for executing investment policy as prescribed by government. The division acts on behalf of the Minister of Finance, Corporation Souls, and carries out the corporate function. This includes providing oversight and monitoring of state enterprise, which includes ExporTT. The division also represents the Minister of Finance at shareholders' meeting, establishes new state enterprise, and pursues the rationalization of government equity holding in state enterprises. We look forward to today's deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Ms. Suku. And may I begin by asking Mr. Hari Prasad of the ExporTT to just share with our committee and the public your mandate, ExporTT mandate, and if you can at the same time provide us with a brief status report on the amalgamation process. Where are we with that process? Has that process been completed or is it ongoing? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Chair. So I'll answer on the mandate, and then I'll pass over to my permanent secretary, who will deal with the update on the amalgamation process. All right. So ExporTT's mandate is simply to increase our non-energy exports and the diversification of our economy. Our work is largely with exporters, is on a company level, and the objectives of the exporters are the same as ours, to increase exports and revenue and forex for the country. So our work involves working with exporters in terms of the capacity building required, building their scale, ensuring that they are able to enter into markets by meeting certain international standards and entry requirements in the first instance, and then the promotion of those goods and services into markets. So that usually involves trade missions and trade shows. Over the last 3 years, we've been able to ramp up the number of those activities with the exporters that we have, who we deem to be export ready. And we've been seeing the results in that. So we've reached the point now where I mentioned in my opening remarks that we're almost doing either a trade show or a trade mission in every month of the year. And we're partnered with the TTMA and the TT Chamber, as well as any other entities that are executing missions, to make sure that there's a national schedule of activities rather than a duplication of efforts where you have multiple agencies going to the same markets. So we are constantly looking at how we improve our level of service, and part of that has to do with how we interact with clients. So we have established a client support services department, that has approximately eight officers whose job is simply to meet with clients, understand their objectives, determine how we can assist them, build out support plans, and execute those plans to ensure that they achieve the exports that they have as a part of their strategic objectives. So I'll end on that, and I'll pass over to my colleague.
Thank you, Danraj. So the amalgamation process to create the new Trinidad and Tobago Trade and Investment Promotion Agency is nearly completed. As Mr. Hari Prasad indicated, the government took the decision in September 2022 to institute this institutional change in our exports and investment architecture. When the decision was taken, we decided, or the best legal advice available to the government was to pursue that objective through Section 220 of the Companies Act. And it has proven to be a much more intricate legal process to achieve amalgamation. I will share with the committee that we have already at the ministry completed consultancies to design the new organizational structure, job descriptions for the new entity, and the legal process is nearly completed in that because we were dealing with three separate legal entities. One would appreciate that there are a lot of legal and industrial relations issues that go concomitant with that. We are hopeful to have the new entity legally in existence in April of this year, 2024, and we are working with our lawyers and consultants to achieve that objective.
Would you mind sharing with our committee what are the numbers involved in terms of the staff at these three entities?
Yes, so currently the total headcount of staff at ExporTT, InvestTT, and CreativeTT is approximately 154 persons. And that's the official organizational structure. And not too sure if that's the actual number of persons currently employed. The purpose of the amalgamation was to create a new entity that would be much more operationally effective and to create synergies between exports and investment promotion. We are looking at a new entity in the vicinity of about 90 persons, give or take a few more depending on some final decisions that has to be taken. So we are moving from about 150 to maybe around, we expect to land around 100 persons.
Now, can you give us a breakdown in terms of each entity when we talk about that 150? How many would be at ExporTT, Creative Industries, Creative TNT?
I think we're at 81, 51.
Chair, I don't have the exact numbers, but ExporTT is by far the largest component of the 150. I'm being told it's about 51, but I think that's your official head count? Or that's it?
Yeah, but not only chart, so the chart.
I think your chart, your
has a higher number.
Yeah, so I think when I looked at their chart, it's about 80 persons of the 150. InvestTT is the smallest of the entities. It's about 20 persons. So that's about 80 and 20, 100. And CreativeTT would be another 50 persons.
Do you have a trade union representing any sector or part of the organization?
Yes. Employees of ExporTT are represented by BIGU. Yes, by BIGU.
By BIGU.
Yeah, yes.
All right. May I also inquire of the Mr. Hari Prasad. Mr. Hari Prasad, can you inform this committee why I shouldn't say why. Could you give us a status report on the outstanding audited financial statements for 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023? Because the last one we have before us is 2018. So can you provide us rather with a status report?
Thank you for that question, Chair, and I'll pass over to my colleague, Mrs. Maria Padilla Benjamin, to answer that.
Hey, Chair, morning again. So we have completed up to 2020. Actually, AGM for that financial year is tomorrow, please God. 2021, the documents have already been submitted to the auditor, and we're just awaiting them providing us with a resource to come in to verify the information that we have supplied. Once they've completed that, we would move on to the other years.
Can you tell this committee what has detained you, particularly when we take into account that the State Enterprise Performance Manual makes it very clear that at the end of your financial year, which is September 30th, you have 4 months in which to submit to the Ministry of Finance. Of course, your Minister, Ministry of Finance, your financials, your audited financial statements. Can you explain to this committee why we are so late? What are the problems? And as if we are to be guided by Mr. Karim, very shortly you're going to have an amalgamated organization. So ExporTT will disappear, and we yet don't have these audited financial statements. Can you explain?
Yes, so I'm not sure if exactly in what year, but we did have an auditor that we had some issues with. We supplied information, but the audits were not completed. And so what we had to do was go back out again and get approved, the procurement process, resubmit to the Ministry of Finance, and get approval for a new auditor. So that took quite some time in terms of going back and forth with the first auditor, I would say, to get them to say, okay, you're doing the audit or you're not doing the audit for us. When we finally got their response and return of our documents is where we then started the process of looking for a new auditor. Since then, we were able to do, if I'm not mistaken, 3 audits in 1 year. And we are just moving with them now. Of course, they're having a challenge with staff. Every time we start a new audit, it's a new staff member. So where we thought it would have been easy just to move with the same company, because the principle is changing, we're starting from ground zero every single time. So, and again, we are at this point that we are ready to go with 2021, but it's a new person that's going to start again.
Is that the auditing firm?
Yes, the auditing firm.
What's the name of the auditing firm?
Baker Tilly.
What?
Baker Tilly.
Okay. What kind of commitment you can give to this committee that before the amalgamation is finalized, we can have all those reports submitted?
Maybe I should ask Anand, the financial consultant, to see what he can propose for us.
Thanks, Maria. Currently, we are preparing 2022 and 2023 to be submitted to the auditors. We're hoping to have those submissions in within the next 2 months. But it really comes down to the auditors scheduling us in. So we would estimate a safe timeline of possibly about the next 6 months or so. We expect to be going through these audits to bring them up to date.
Mr. Harry Prasad, can you tell this committee what is your annual allocation from the state, from the government,
Okay,
to operate ExporTT?
Okay, our recurrent allocation is roughly total. Okay, so well, the recurrent is 9 million plus our project funding, which is usually around 5 million or so 14 million.
14 million?
Yeah.
Okay. You did indicate to this committee earlier on that you have exported, or exporters have exported, close to $5 million. Is that TT or US?
That would be US dollars.
US.
Yeah.
But you also indicated to this committee that there are exporters who have not been providing ExporTT with the necessary data on values of the export. You care to elaborate?
Sure. So there's a reason for that, in that there's a process involved in terms of conducting the sale Well, first of all, it starts with the meetings at trade missions. So you would have your meetings, you would generate leads from those meetings, and then you would enter a period of negotiations. In some instances, there are some changes required to products, maybe to the packaging, maybe you don't currently meet certain specifications in that market. So in some cases, there's an immediate order, but in most cases, there is a period where these adjustments need to be made, the negotiations need to be completed, and then we get the information in. So that is one reason. Another reason is that some exporters may not want to share all the information that they have with us in terms of the values. So we will get information in terms of, okay, an order was received or a container was shipped out, but not necessarily the value to tally up to our current figure of 5 million. How we get around that, however, is that we do have some access to export data by a company basis. So we are able to look at, what the trajectory of that exporter would have been for a particular market. So for instance, if that exporter were to attend a trade mission to Barbados, for example, but has never exported to Barbados before, if we look at the trend over the successive months of the trade mission, we could identify whether or not it was as a result of the trade mission and then go back to the exporter to verify.
Can you explain to this committee what are the benefits exporters derive by becoming members or associates of ExporTT in order to get their export products to external markets? What are the benefits? What are the incentives?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So we like to think of ExporTT as a one-stop shop for all things export. So generally, if an exporter comes to us, they will come to us with a particular goal or an objective. They want to enter this market, or they want to increase their export revenue by this percentage. So we always start from a point of information gathering, research. So we have a research department who is able to look at trends, look at the performance in different markets for certain products, and then advise the exporter. Sometimes they would already know which markets they want to enter to, and then based on that, we could do a deep dive into those markets about trade agreements, whether or not you have duty-free access, what are the export requirements to get into that market, because you'd want to make sure you have all the information possible, the competitive environment as well, the pricing and so on. So you make a good decision. It could be very expensive to enter a market in terms of your investment, so you want to make sure that is a right investment that could give you the return. After that research is completed, perhaps it reveals certain gaps that an exporter may have in terms of standards, packaging, scale, prices. So then we will work with those exporters to fill in those gaps. In some instances, we have specifically tailored programs where we have consultants and coaches who are former export managers who will work with companies to walk them through the process of, okay, this is how we develop an entry plan for this particular market. They would know because they've done it before with some of the larger exporters. We also have training programs to fill in some certain gaps that personnel within the companies may have as well. We offer grants for the purchase of machinery and equipment in collaboration with Ministry of Trade. There's a grant fund facility that offers up to $250,000 to exporters who are looking to export products or substitute imports coming into the country. All right. We have a research and development grant that offers up to $1 million to exporters who would like to develop a new or innovative product or process or service that it's also exportable. There are a number of other areas that we offer assistance to exporters on as well. Co-financing is one of our popular services where we recognize that some smaller exporters may find it difficult to overcome certain costs of exporting. For example, shipping of samples, registering your products, participating in trade shows, IP registrations, and so on. So we co-finance 50% of some of those activities so that exporters could move on, and the cost is not a burden to them to enter into the world of exports per se. So there are a number of other grants and initiatives as well in support of that.
Maybe what you can do for us, Mr. Hari Prasad, is provide us in writing all of those incentives that are provided by ExporTT to encourage our exporters. Before I introduce and invite my colleague, the Honorable Minister Hines, to take the floor, I would like to ask Mr. Karim, if Trinidad and Tobago taxpayers are given all these incentives, up to $1 million if you have a new product, $250,000 in grants, co-financing, and my colleague, Mr. Hari Prasad, gave another example. All of these incentives are being given, yet still, exporters seem not to be efficiently cooperating with ExporTT and maybe the Ministry of Trade and Industry by providing these entities with the true export values of their products. So instead of us being told this morning that the figures you have is 5 million US, that figure could be 10 million. It could be 15 million, but you don't know. But taxpayers are given incentives to exporters to export their products. What kind of action or initiatives, Mr. Karim, you believe could be employed to hasten information that is so critically important for data collection, for accuracy? So not only the government of TNT, but the people of TNT would be able to know that non-energy export sector is increasing our foreign exchange levels in Trinidad and Tobago. What can be done to encourage these exporters to provide up-to-date information to the Ministry of Trade and Industry and ExporTT?
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. I will answer the question like this. I mean, I don't know that it's a generalization that exporters are not in large mass not providing the information to ExporTT. One should appreciate that there are a number of businesses and exporters that don't utilize the services of ExporTT because they're large, they have their own capacity to export, and they will, in some measure, don't need government services to grow and expand. But as Danraj indicated, we have sought over the years through the services that are provided through all of our state enterprises, including ExporTT, to strengthen the compliance mechanism associated with the award of grants and services. In fact, all of the services that Danraj, Mr. Hari Prasad spoke about requires a legal, a sort of contractual document, legal engagement. And firms are required who are accessing the ExporTT services to provide that information. It's always a challenge because firms very often, for their own reasons, including competitor information, they may not want other firms finding out what they're doing, may not provide that level of accuracy. But I want to assure the committee that independent of getting the information from firms, through automation of the customs processes over the last few years, the Ministry of Trade and Industry has accurate, up-to-date, real-time trade data on all of our firms exporting. In fact, as Danraj indicated, we provide where we don't get the information from the firms because people are required to do their customs declarations, and because that's an automated process now, I can tell you what is the exports for each firm as of yesterday. So we do provide, in a sense, I hate to use the word back channel, but we do back channel the information to ExporTT so that we ensure that ExporTT is aware of the export performance of each of their members. We do it for the Exim Bank, because I know you mentioned making sure foreign exchange is coming back into the country. Exim Bank will tell you they rely heavily on the Ministry of Trade's trade data to know if their clients are utilizing the various forex facilities in the way that the government envisaged it to work. So from a compliance perspective, ExporTT continues to work with their clients to get that information, but I want to assure the committee that we have our ways of ensuring that the incentives that are being afforded to the private sector are utilized in a manner that they should be.
May I, before my colleague enters the picture, is it possible for us to conclude tentatively, unless you guide us otherwise, that the $5 million US that you mentioned earlier to Mr. Hari Prasad is a gross underestimation of the reality because of the fact that we don't have accurate information coming from ExporTT? I don't know, you know, as trade and industry, could give this committee a current reality check as it relates to 2023 export. Instead of US 5 million, what is the real figure? Because as you said, you can get all that data from customs. What is the reality in terms of our export for 2023 via trade and industry? All the entities, those who are accessing ExporTT and using the incentives, those who are not utilizing these facilities. What is our export reality in terms of US?
All right, so we anticipated that question, and I will hand over to my colleague, Ms. Lakan Singh, who's our Director of Statistics, to answer that question specifically.
Thank you. And so with respect to that particular question, so we have been tracking the exports, and we've been seeing in 2022, we had a total exports of $17.9 billion. And then moving to 2023, we had a similar amount of exports in terms of 17.5 billion in terms of exports.
Is that TT or US?
So that is in TT dollars.
17.5
billion.
5 billion, okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. I'll now ask my colleague, the Honorable Minister Fitzgerald Hines, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Prasad, I take it that given what you do, you acquaint yourself with the quality and the safety standards in the international markets and franchises. And one of the advantages, one of the benefits you offer the exporter, particularly new ones, as we encourage export trade. And by the way, I'm very happy to know at least, we increased in 2022 and we maintained that for 2023. So that's quite good. And by virtue of your knowledge of the external markets and the standards expected, the benefit you offer is by advising the local exporter and certifying that they have achieved those standards. You have introduced a certification program. How has that been going? What is your sense of the evaluation of the success of that over the recent past?
Okay, so I'll speak a bit about what was happening prior to that program first, because we had a standards implementation program that really focused on the technical side of an advisory role of what companies need to do to achieve certain standards. So we had consultants who would work with companies to advise them as such. After that advice, however, it became apparent that a lot of the companies did not have the wherewithal to actually complete the infrastructure changes, purchase the pieces of machinery that are needed. So they were unable to attain those standards. So that's why we came up with the International Certification Fund, which dealt with some of those gaps. So it goes up to 500,000, and it offers the financing to do all the changes required to take you up to certification, right? So it has been going very well so far in terms of the companies that have accessed the grants. Most of them were able to achieve the standards and then move on to export their products globally.
Yeah.
Sure.
Member, I could, we recently received a very nice letter from a local beneficiary of the International Certification Fund. And that person in Trinidad, one of our major franchises were importing all of their dough used in their end product. And that person, through the ICF, were able to, because you have to understand that franchises have very strict standards that their franchisees must use. And that person, through the grant, were able to upgrade their plant, machinery, and equipment. And today, that international franchise, which is in Trinidad, are able to source all of their local doughs from that local producer here in Trinidad. So it's a real good example of not only utilizing the services of ExporTT for the export market, but also utilizing the services of ExporTT to save foreign exchange leakage and to promote import substitution. And that is why, as Mr. Haripras had indicated, a large part of the Export Booster initiative is geared to helping local firms meet international standards, not only for the export market, but also for the domestic market where international franchisees require that.
Yeah. And I have observed as well, thank you very kindly, yes, I have observed as well that you have allocated a sum of money, I think it's $2 million, to support product testing, to ensure that the local product is tested, that it meets the international standard. How has that been going?
That has been one of the major challenges for exporters going out to market. And that particular grant covers a number of things. It's not only just meeting the requirements, but for certain markets, there's a difference in terms of the expectation for a product. For example, perhaps locally, we have a 6-pack of items. In another market, it might be in a 4-pack. And that is what is prevailing in that particular market. And there are adjustments that need to be made in the packaging for that product. So this grant also covers those sort of modifications as well, in the packaging as well as the product itself. For example, I'm sure that members of the committee will know that the Coca-Cola that you find around the world is not the same. There are different changes in terms of the sugar content and the taste profile. So similarly, this grant allows our exporters to make those changes because a lot of our products are developed for the Caribbean market and that taste palette, particularly in food and beverage products. But it's different in Latin America, it's different in Europe. So this grant also allows for that as well. And it has been doing quite well. It's one of the newer projects that we have. So we've only had about 8 beneficiaries so far, but they have been able to really utilize that grant to overcome some of those challenges that they have been experiencing and work with their distributors to enter the market. Coming up soon, there will be a further change to that, in that we're seeing that as we go out to trade shows, in particular, we're seeing the packaging offered in those markets. They are much more attractive, and I think they offer more in terms of functionality. You could reseal things and use from it one time and then use it. There's ways of pouring it and stuff like that. So those are some of the changes that we want to look at from a marketing perspective now. What kind of modifications can we make to packaging so that we are on that international level and competing at that level? Right now, we're working with 10 companies in a Tobago Indigenous Sweets project, where we started from the beginning, ground up, in looking at the product in particular, standardizing the product, looking at the food safety. So it's the tamarind ball, the fudge, Benny ball, sugar cake. We've changed up all that and improved the product, the shelf life, and right now we're looking at the packaging. We have developed packaging that will sustain a longer shelf life, and what we're working on now would be their commercial packaging, which is going to be in a nice resealable pouch, foil backed, nice label in front, and then we have an export packaging that offers a box with the 4 items with nice windows and stuff like that, so you can actually see the product is inviting, and that will be for export market. So that is an example of why that packaging is important in terms of, drawing the attention to the customer, particularly for something that a foreign customer may not know. So they're looking at something for the first time. They may bypass it. They're not accustomed seeing those things in the grocery. But if it draws your attention, you pick up the box, you look at it, there's a nice story, you learn about the product, and then you make a purchase as a result of that.
What you have said is very easy to understand, Mr. Chairman, permit me, because I recently read, very interestingly, that one manufacturer wanting to get into a certain market produced ladies' garments, and for him, what was small, medium, and large was standard. And having produced in that context, it did not work in that particular market because small, medium, and large means something else in that particular market. And in that same article I read where like the food container that people purchase in, whether it's a 3-compartment or a 4-compartment, depends on the market you're working with. And the exporter, well-intended as he is, would not have an understanding of those kinds of fine details, and therefore this service, to me, is very critical. Let me ask, before I give way to one of my other colleagues, you mentioned about the Benny Ball and that sort of thing. It is clear to me that you recognize that there are some particular challenges facing the Tobago producer in the context of potential exports. And you have, for that reason, implemented what you describe for accuracy, the Tobago Capacity Building Program. I admire the fact that you have focused specifically on Tobago. What are those challenges and how have you done that? And how has this Tobago Capacity Building Program been going? You just gave an example, but develop the theme for my benefit.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the why. Why would you target these products in Tobago? I think when we look out globally, certainly beyond the region, there's a real need for something that is different, that is unique and has like a story behind it. And for us, the Tobago products, it ticked all those boxes. So it looked like a product that if we did the work for them, it's something that could do well abroad because it's very different as representative of Trinidad and Tobago. You look at the people who are developing the products, where they are, where they operate, it's a nice story, and you could see that, being developed and being impactful and in the export markets. So that project it took a lot of work to really get off the ground, because our initial idea was basically, these are small producers, let's get them to standardize the product. And then we would get all of them to come together to fulfill orders. But to our surprise, when we got down to the nuts and bolts of it, the sugar cake in Scarborough is fundamentally different from the one in Charlottesville in terms of the spices and what they use and stuff like that. So they were not willing to give up the recipes, which is important to them, and how they get the uniqueness of the product. So then we had to treat with them individually, and that's how we worked on the project. So we worked with our consultants, Kariri, who did all the work. So first of all, they would have just visited the kitchen of these persons to see what the operation, what they did, and just took notes. And then after, advised them that these are the things you need to change: humidity control, how you handle the food, how you apportion your sizes, and then made recommendations in terms of the process and pieces of machinery and equipment that were essential to that process. Then they moved on to your food safety, good manufacturing practices, elements of hazard and critical control points, so that now you need to handle food in a particular way to ensure that there are fewer microbes, and that increases your shelf life. We moved on to packaging, and now we're on the marketing phase. Once we've completed the new packaging, we will then look at the export markets. We did do a sort of trial for the companies and have been doing so in smaller trade missions. Going forward, we try to take one or two of these companies across so that they are acclimated with, the process of making a pitch, presenting your products to an international buyer, and getting that feedback, making the changes, and that sort of thing.
And this is no insignificant work. This is very serious because, I go to the supermarkets here and I see Jamaican patties frozen.
Yeah.
And even the vegetarian like me can participate in it. Whether they have beef, so it's. But to do that, you have to understand what is required in Trinidad, and vice versa. I understand that. In the business of energy, my colleague will say, green energy is becoming an issue for us. So as we produce energy products, we have to consider what that market wants. I see the same thing is happening even in terms of packaging.
Yes.
In terms of our exporters meeting market standards elsewhere. And I observed that you have allocated $2.5 million in the context of green packaging. Please just develop that for me so I can understand what you are doing in that regard and how that has been going.
Okay. Well, that was an allocation that we have not touched just yet. So what we have been doing is spending a lot of time liaising with the stakeholders, understanding what those particular needs are. But it is recognized as an important point.
And you're making your way through that.
Yeah, making our way through it. Because the packaging being recyclable, having organic material, that is important. And usually like the conventional route, but what we're seeing now is the reusability of packaging as well. So you are seeing, particularly in plastics, packaging that is stronger, and then you could use it over time as well, and that also cuts down on your carbon footprint and the impact on the environment. So some of our companies have been utilizing that approach.
I thank you very much, Mr. Hari Prasad. Mr. Chairman?
I just have a roll-on question, and that is that we've been hearing about how we're treating with locals in terms of getting them export ready and so on. Tell me, are we driven by exporters and where they want to go, or do we have a more overarching strategy on where Trinidad and Tobago wants to go?
Okay. So ExporTT and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, we would have our own strategy in terms of the places that we would like to go. And this is based on trade complementarity and growth. It all comes down to where the exporter wants to go. We could present this information to them in terms of these markets. These are the opportunities, these are the possibilities, but they are the actors at the end of the day. So we do our job in making sure that they have all the information available to make these important decisions. But it comes down to them. So for example, if we say we're doing a trade mission to Taiwan or something like that, and it makes sense. And sometimes these things probably make sense. You look at the data and it has a high complementarity for all the products that we're doing. But you need to look at other factors. What are the duties? What are the logistics of getting there? So those are some of the things that we present as well. But when exporters look at the situation, they would have their own strategies. They would have their own objectives that they would want to pursue. And at the end of the day, if they are able to successfully execute those strategies and generate export orders, then it's something that we support.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have a few questions based on some of the responses and one or two general questions. The question, Mr. Hari Prasad, you mentioned that not all of the exporting companies access your service. You are primarily, if I understand it right, looking at the new exporting companies, the smaller ones, and trying to facilitate them get into the export market and help them grow. does any of the larger players access your facilities, your grant funding, your investment incentives, and so on? The larger fellas who would not normally depend on ExporTT for advice, but asked for access for those grants and so on. Do you have some of those accessing?
Yes. So we develop a suite of services that caters to all sizes of exporters. So a lot of the grants, we set caps and thresholds in terms of revenue, export revenue, to ensure that the smaller companies benefit from it. So you'll see, particularly with respect to grants, that is how it's structured. It's structured for small and medium, because we generally work with the assumption that larger companies are able to make those investments on their own. Nevertheless, larger companies will come to us for things like research. They would participate in trade missions, information in terms of market entry requirements. ExporTT is the trade certification authority for trade agreements in the, for the CARICOM trade agreements, and all the agreements we have through CARICOM. So they would come to us for advice in terms of that. We will do all the factory visits, ensure that they meet the requirements in the various trade agreements, and then we issue certificates to them. So whether you are a small or large exporter, that is one service you must get from ExporTT, and we could advise them in terms of how you utilize the trade agreements, how you organize your inputs, where you could source it from, and that sort of thing, so that they will be able to have that duty-free access.
So generally, the entire exporting community accesses your service in one way or the other.
Yes,
right.
They can. Yeah.
So the follow-up question to that is the fact that, Mr. Karim said that sometimes he has to use some back channeling to get data in order to properly plan, I assume, where you want to go in the next fiscal year or 2 or 3 years down the road. Do you think that it should be mandatory that anybody that is accessing services from ExporTT via funding, I mean, as Chairman said, it's taxpayers' money,
yes, that
they be required by law to provide data, not specific trade secrets. Right? If I know you're selling $100 million in supplies to somewhere, I really don't need to know what is the spices you're using or what's the technology that you're using to give away a competitive advantage. But if you can't measure, you can't manage. So do you think having some sort of mandatory requirement for these companies that are accessing taxpayers' money, that they have some formal requirement of submitting data to you?
Yes, and as my PS mentioned, every single grant or every single dollar that ExporTT provides to an exporter, a contract is signed between ExporTT and that exporter. And there's a clause within that document that requires them to report 1 month after, 3 months after, 6 months after, and a year after, in terms of what benefits they have gained in terms of export revenue.
Have they been supplying that data?
So that's an ongoing issue in terms of following up and trying to get the information from the exporters. So it's been a task. There are some who will give the information freely, and then others, it requires some more effort. And in terms of my pitch, when I speak to an exporter about our services and our support, it's basically this. We are exchanging grants, money, advice, technical expertise in exchange for information on your success. That is the transaction. So, I mean, it works with some persons, but with others, I think PS mentioned that, whether or not the information gets in the hands. Now, you're talking about trade secrets and ingredients and that sort of thing, but even information about someone exporting, someone getting an order into this market. Some markets are quite small. There are only a couple of players. So if you know one person in this market, it's probably only 2 or 3 distributors they could sell to. So then you make some calls and then you try to find out and uncover that information. So there's that side of it. Maybe we need to do more to understand. And I've asked my team to have a call with exporters. And if they say no, let's try to understand why. Is it that they're uncomfortable? Do they have a fear? Do they need us to sign a confidentiality agreement with them? No problem, we can do that. If they want to just give me an estimate, you round it to the nearest US 1,000, at least we could work with that. So those are some things we'll look at.
The reason why I ask that, right,
Yeah.
because it follows this question that I want to ask, and perhaps P.S. Karim could jump in here. So it is well known that we do expect to have a shortfall in energy exports over the next couple of years for a number of reasons. Therefore, we are hoping as a national community that the non-energy exports can be ramped up to supplement that forex deficit that, somehow the state has to manage going forward. Now, the question that I want to ask you on that is there any specific identifiable tasks that you are going to be executing, or have you started to execute? Because some things won't happen overnight. It will take some time that would assist in the ramping up of that non-energy market. And in doing so, have you looked at what export commodities that we can manufacture here in Trinidad that we're probably not doing too well with, but has a market somewhere in the Caribbean that we can find a way to get it into those markets to help in whatever small way that will ramp up our foreign exchange? Has any look at that specific area been done, lately within the Ministry and ExporTT?
So thank you, member, for that question. Growing the non-energy export sector of the economy is a gigantic task for obvious structural reasons. But at the ministry, we see it as an important mandate, and we have been aggressively trying to do so through a series of programs and initiatives. One of which you are speaking about is market intelligence and commercial intelligence. We have been investing heavily in identifying those sectors in the international export market where commodities are growing. One of those initiatives is something called the Trade and Investment Business Portal, where you could go to ttbusiness.gov.tt, and this is something freely offered through the Ministry of Trade and Industry directly, and literally find specific export opportunities in any export market. And in fact, it's a huge service that a lot of the export sector utilizes. So if you want to know if I'm thinking about exporting these sleeves, and I want to know where I can sell these sleeves to, I can just go punch it in on the portal and find out which countries are buying it and what are the importing requirements. And we share that information with ExporTT as they engage their clientele. So that's commercial intelligence. But at the ministry, we do have the trade policy, which is publicly available. And within the trade policy, there is a trade strategy that has identified certain sectors in the non-energy sector for growth. And we do have targets associated with those subsectors. So commercial intelligence is one aspect. The other aspect is having told somebody of the opportunities, because I think that's the piggyback on Chairman McClatchy's question. A country's trade strategy is, the role of the government is just to facilitate exports. You can only tell persons in the business community what export opportunities exist. You can, as a state, sign the trade agreements that allows your exporters to go into foreign markets, and you would discern that the trade policy of Trinidad and Tobago has been very consistent over the last 30 years, regardless of administrations. Every administration sees the role of the state in signing agreements, being very aggressive and doing bilateral trade agreements, and we have continued that. But having signed the agreements and given market access to your exporters, you have to now tell them what the export opportunities are, which I just spoke to, and also hold their hands and carry them to the export market. So as Mr. Hari Prasad indicated, the ExporTT has been working very closely with the private sector, and in particular the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association and the Chamber of Commerce, in bringing exporters to market. Because there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of unknown issues of being on your own in an export market. In the last fiscal year, we have done about 10 trade missions. This year, we're doing about 12 trade missions. Every month, if you look at the newspaper, you would see ExporTT or TTMA leading a group of exporters to different markets throughout the Caribbean. So, and then, of course, you have the direct services of ExporTT, which we spoke about, helping them to do product testing, helping them to meet international certification. So it's a compendium of support systems from the agreements, giving the market intelligence, giving the products and services, and just being consistent and aggressive at it. And I would tell you, at the Ministry of Trade, that's the role, that has been the output of the government, regardless of who's there, which is to help that, just consistently help your export sector to realize that potential.
No, I have seen the data, and I mean, I am happy, to a large extent in terms of the progress that the Ministry of Trade, in terms of, the improvements that you've seen happen over the years. Taking into consideration that global shipping, costs vary, based on what's happening internationally. Has ExporTT looked at focusing on our regional markets, both in the Caribbean and South America, in terms of where we have closer markets, least cost to get, the products to those markets? Have any specific work been done? I know we have some partial scope agreements with Chile, I think Panama and so on, but anywhere else as you go further south into South America or, up the chains of the Caribbean islands, have we been successful so far in finding markets in those areas to get our goods and services into primarily those areas because of the lower cost of getting the products into those markets?
Yeah, sure. That is our primary focus. It has been so prior to the shipping, so we've just continued work as normal in that regard. So most of the trade missions that we have been doing have been looking at the region, CARICOM in particular, where we have the CARICOM agreement. Now, there are some debates around, those markets being saturated with products. But I think the governments of the region have had this target in place, 25 by 25, in terms of to cut down on the food import bill that is quite substantial. So when you look at the figures, the imported products that are coming into the region far outweighs what Trinidad exports or any other of the countries export to each other, the intra-regional trade. It exceeds that. Yeah. So I think there is potential, given that there are these issues in terms of shipping and getting products in, for us to ramp up. And certainly we have seen successes through the various trade missions that we have been doing in that regional market, English-speaking Caribbean CARICOM market. Now, moving out of the region now, because that's like the bread and butter, that's where all the exports come from. You want to get out into Latin America that is also close. There are certain challenges to that in terms of language, the competitiveness, because now you're moving from small islands population of like a million or less, and then you're looking at, Colombia, 40, 50 million, 11 million up in Cuba, stuff like that. And they are linked as well. So they have their own trading blocks. In Central America, in South America, they have their own trade agreements throughout the world. So even though we have trade agreements, which helps, it levels the playing field for us in that we pay the same duty that they are paying. So again, it comes back to how can we be competitive there? Maybe it's not in price, maybe it's in offering something that is different, and that is what we have been looking at. There have been successes, particularly in Colombia. We see some of our larger exporters are doing some work in Colombia, in the Dominican Republic, and to do more, we have implemented through the Export Booster Initiative trade attaches and commercial officers in key markets, and one of those markets is Panama. So we have a person on the ground operating out of the embassy in Panama, and he has his targets in terms of how much exports we would like him to generate. So his job is to generate export opportunities, keep his ear close to the ground to understand what these opportunities are so that we can bring it back to exporters. Export opportunities or any opportunities, they have a shelf life.
Yeah.
Go ahead, yeah.
I just want to add to Danraj. I shouldn't say Danraj because I'm so accustomed calling him Danraj every day, right? But I'll give you a good example. In exactly 2 months, ExporTT is leading a trade mission to Curaçao. That is a market, a small market, with huge export potential for Trinidad and Tobago. And we at the Ministry and ExporTT have been looking at Curaçao's imports, quite significant from the rest of the world. The flight is less than 2 hours away. And so we have been identifying those markets outside the English-speaking Caribbean that have export potential, and we are going to be aggressively targeting. I think TTMA led a trade mission to Curaçao last year, and we do agree with your synopsis that there are export markets right out near the border of the Caribbean. But interestingly, Chair, member, even though the market is close, the transportation challenges are significant. So there are no direct shipping lines between Trinidad and Tobago and Curaçao. And so you have to move around, right? Yeah. But there are bilateral discussions taking place between Trinidad and Tobago and Curaçao from an air transportation perspective as well as sea to get direct shipping infrastructure in place to facilitate exports.
Mr. Chair, I have just one question before I hand over to one of my colleagues. And I want to come back to these smaller exporters, right, who may be more at risk in terms of the relationship that they may have on a first-time arrangement with a vendor somewhere in the Caribbean or Latin America. Does ExporTT look at assisting these new exporters with managing a bit of the risk associated with, I'm not familiar with how the payments are arranged, whether the vendor has to pay you all the money up front before you ship it out. Does ExporTT look at some sort of risk management to help these exporters in the event a vendor doesn't pay, for one, or the risk of fluctuations in getting U.S. currency and so on in terms of exchange rates and so on? Like insurance, do you encourage these exporters, these small exporters, to look at insurance and to mitigate some of those areas, or is that something that you don't get involved in terms of the risk management on the transaction between the exporter and the vendor in the foreign market?
Okay, so every country that we embark on a trade mission to, it usually involves a doing business seminar where we bring in different experts in the field, and the participants are permitted to ask questions similar to those. Okay. Those are questions that come up nearly all the time in terms of the tax regime and getting currency back and that sort of thing. So they are able to ask those questions to get responses on it and have that information in hand. We do training programs as well in terms of like distributor contracts, which we think are important. Some exporters may not have these things, but one of my former CEOs always say, you need the contract not for the marriage but for the divorce, right? So those things become important at that point in time. So we certainly encourage that. We provide drafts of those distributor contracts, and the distributor contracts as well will sort of help you to overcome certain non-tariff barriers we've come across in different markets, where if you don't understand the agreements properly. There's an example of Law 173 in the Dominican Republic market, for example, whereas if you don't eliminate a particular clause, your distributor could become your distributor for life once it's registered in the central bank of that country. But if you and the distributor were to negotiate that, hey, we're going to exclude this particular clause, then it is not applicable. So things like that are important, and we do advise them, and that doing business seminar is something that is certainly... You mentioned Exim Bank. Right, is certainly something that is standard, and also my PS just reminded me that Exim Bank also offers some services in terms of due diligence with respect to buyers as well. So we do those referrals to our colleagues at Exim.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you very kindly, Chairman. Chairman, I must begin by stating it's actually very encouraging to hear the comments and the reports coming out of ExporTT here this morning, particularly in a time when we all know global economies are being challenged. It's a post-COVID era. There are tariffs and there are barriers to trade, but we are also seeing the breaking down of some trading blocks and the market penetration. And so it's very, very encouraging to hear of the very good work, and I want to compliment you for that. I want to thank you significantly as well for this comprehensive document, for responding to the questions that the PAEC would have sent to you and sending it back to us in a very timely manner. So thank you very much for that. I want to refer to your document now, please, just very briefly to ask you, in your strategy at a glance with the refined mission and goal, there is no page number, it's a separate document, but it's after page, just after page 50, where you talk about it's your refined mission and vision, and you just talked about your goal is to move the TNT non-energy export from 2.7 billion to 5.4 billion by September 2024. So
Right.
September 2024 is this year. So I just wanted to ask you, first of all, to just give us a status update as to where we are
Right.
insofar as meeting that target, please.
So that was a pretty ambitious target, and it was set at a point in time. I recall the conversation clearly in terms of what does the country need versus what we can do. And I think we could all agree that we need to be doing a lot in non-energy exports, and that is one of the reasons we set that target so high. It was a target also that was included in the Vision 2030 document, and TTMA's, I think, manufacturing strategy as well. So it was repeated across all platforms, because I think based on the same reason, based on the needs of the country and the need to really look. So what it was meant to do is to be an ambitious target that forces you to think outside of the box, to do things differently, to start achieving more, because we could have set an attainable target at a much lower level. That being said, we have since had discussions with our board and made some revisions, because we have to set targets for ExporTT as well. These targets are national targets, but at the same time, through our interventions, although it might have ripple effects throughout the economy, we need to have a direct, be able to record our direct impact and show that the funds that are given to us are being utilized and we are seeing the results as a matter of fact. So in our new corporate KPIs, which I believe I would have shared as well, it's 50 million, 25 million per year that we have set out. And that's the 5 million, as in relation to the 5 million I was speaking about. So if you look back to 2018, as a result of our activities, we would have generated some 1.4 million. So from then to now, passing through COVID, I think we're growing in terms of attaining 5 million. And as I mentioned, we need to look at those figures, gather all the information. And I agree with Chairman in that those figures could be about 10, 15 million. I strongly believe so when we tally up everything. So perhaps we don't hit target, but certainly I think we're moving in the right direction. And I think those targets help us, the ambitious targets help us to keep moving in an upward trajectory.
Thank you very much for that, and I wouldn't discourage you from setting very ambitious targets. It augurs well for the country.
Yeah.
So you used the words direct impact just now, and this is this committee meeting is being broadcast nationally, so that means there is a huge listening audience and viewing audience at this time. So as you speak of direct impact, can you give us some numbers insofar as the number of beneficiaries of some of the grants that you provide, as well as the number of businesses that you have worked with over the past 5 years or so? If you can give us numbers of the direct impact that you have had on the businesses in Trinidad and Tobago insofar as export.
To be exact.
I could give you the figures, right? Ballpark figure, right? So roughly the companies that we estimate that there are roughly around 400 exporters, active exporters, based on the statistics that we look at. I say ExporTT has about 100 of those as key clients. Key clients meaning that we'd had like 3 or more interventions with them. They're known to us, and we continue conversations and support to them. And then for the others, maybe another 100 is maybe one-off sort of interventions that we have, right? But I could provide all the details in terms of every single grant, the numbers, who was able to receive
Not
it, and
the
that sort of
actual
thing.
details, just
Yeah.
the numbers.
Just the numbers, okay. Yeah, sure, no problem. In terms of the numbers of who accessed the grants.
Thank you. You also
Yeah, sure.
talked about all your trade missions, and I do see them. There's one in Belize now, or
Last 2 weeks.
2 weeks ago.
Yes.
So I do see the trade missions and the frequent attempts to go out and penetrate external markets.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any? Can you report of any successes that have come out of that, which are pegged to the mandates of those trade missions?
Yes. So a lot of a large part of the 5 million I spoke about comes from trade missions, because that's the major contributor to that figure.
Right.
The other major contributor will be the grants. So we are seeing, after every trade mission, we get the reports of immediate orders. So we are seeing that, and then we have a record of the leads. So for example, for every trade mission, like in 2021 to 2022, we had 9 missions. And then we have reports of all the leads that come out from those meetings. They're categorized in A, B, and C leads, where A has the highest probability of success. B, there's some work to be done. C, it's going to be a difficult journey to get that converted into an order. And then we focus on the A leads with the companies to see what sort of direct support they would require to convert that. So that's the follow-up process. As I mentioned earlier in my opening statement, after that, in terms of the process of making the conversion, the negotiations, the changes, and stuff like that. So it does take some time, but we are very happy to see that in nearly every trade mission that we have embarked on recently in the last 2 years, we have had export orders coming through almost immediately. And then we have some stars in export, some new exporters, some companies with some young people we see in the second generation coming through now, taking over from their parents, and they're bringing a different level of energy, and in some cases some competitiveness we're seeing developing over time in terms of how much exports is generated in a particular year, because there's some awards that TTMA gives out, and it's some very healthy competition that we're seeing. So they're trying to undo each other in terms of the export values, and certainly that helps our cause.
If I could add on that, as Mr. Hari Prasad indicated, one of the side benefits of the trade mission strategy has been to encourage the younger persons in manufacturing. We talk about it a lot at the ministry and in discussions with the TTMA and ExporTT. A lot of our existing exporters have been in family-run businesses for maybe a few decades. And the challenge has been to get the children of these businesses involved in business as well. And what we are seeing through the trade missions is a lot of the children of the owners, a lot of new young people getting involved in manufacturing. And we see that as very exciting, because it means that, not in 2024, but in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, a new class of entrepreneurs and manufacturers are going to be taking the country forward. And for us, that is very, as you talk about the overall strategy to grow non-energy exports, we are very encouraged by what we are seeing in that regard.
I have 2 more questions, please. Thanks very kindly. Are there any, I saw your SWOT analysis, I saw the synopsis of your SWOT analysis, and you identified a few threats in it. Are there any threats that you think would stymie rather the progress of ExporTT in a real way, unless you're able to treat with it immediately? Let me try and find the page for you.
I don't think so.
It's on page 28. Yeah? Your SWOT analysis starts on 20.
Early threats.
So on page 28, you listed that, the main threat is really the use of data and confidentiality and things along those lines.
Yeah. So the thing is, we are able to overcome this in 2 ways, in terms of the data that's being provided by the Ministry of Trade. So recently, as part of the single electronic window, they've utilized a visual. It is a Tableau. Tableau is a data visualizer that now allows us to run searches by product, sector, company, market, and it really allows us to really understand what is happening in different export markets. So that information is being fed to us more easily. The other thing is that we have people on the ground now. So I mentioned that we have commercial attaches, commercial officers and trade attaches now. They are in 5 markets. So we have in Panama, Miami, UK, Jamaica and Guyana. So those are the markets. So those persons are trade specialists. They're on the ground. Their role is to understand what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, and regularly feed that back to our exporters so they are able to make the most of the opportunities and also understand these different challenges. So those are 2 of the ways I believe that we could overcome the threat that I identified in the submission.
Thank you very kindly.
Yeah.
And of course, you'd pay attention to data protection as well, because data mining is the next big thing, the next big
so
that would come.
Maybe I'll invite my my colleague Maria to talk a bit about what we're doing in that area. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So some of the things that we've initiated, given all these cybersecurity issues, every quarter for the staff, we have started having an awareness session so that they're looking out to see what are some of the things happening, how can we change passwords, regularly feed that information back to ICT unit. We have installed endpoint security protection on the laptops, and we are moving to do the company cell phones as well. We are also in the middle of implementing our Veeam backup solution as well too, so that again we can do all we can as an organization to protect the information. And I know that the ICT department continuously looks at what other ways we can keep everything safe, backed up, and protected. As well too, within the system there are role-specific permissions, so not everyone can access everything in the organization as well too.
That's very good to hear. Thank you. Wanted to say something, sorry, Mr.
Yeah, I neglected to mention, and my colleague reminded me about one of the initiatives that we executed, which is an inward buyer's mission. So it's different from the regular trade missions. Not everybody could afford to go out to various markets. So in this initiative, what we do is we liaise with our exporters and identify key buyers in key markets, and we bring them down to Trinidad and Tobago. All expenses paid. We really roll out the red carpet for them, and then they meet with the exporters one-on-one, no more than 10 exporters. So we carefully target which exporters they meet with, and there has to be a coincidence of once in terms of that meeting, right? That particular project has been yielding very good results because of the level of detail that we pay in terms of the matching. And recently, at the last IDB Praise Awards, the project was shortlisted for a Customer Excellence Award. So I think we understand why we marginally lost.
Well, congratulations on that. Sorry, you wanted to ask a question? So, Chairman, I will wrap up my first round of questioning here, and I want to thank you all very kindly. So it really is refreshing to have such knowledgeable people lead and present here today, and thank you very much for the direction you're taking this industry in.
I thank you profusely, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to endorse the sentiments just expressed by Member Lizama Lee Singh, and of course that of Vice Chairman Parry, both of whom, like me, might have been spirited, encouraged by the very enthusiastic and assured manner in which you all have been approaching this business. This is very, very refreshing, and I'm very happy to know that. And I hope Mr. Jardine, as director, would take good note. Must be a comfortable director in this regard. You mentioned Panama along the way, and I just have 2 points I would like to raise. There was P.S. Karim some time ago, maybe about a few months ago. I am aware that a group of businessmen had raised some discussions with you all about the question of Panama, and suggesting that we could take some space in that arrangement in the free zone there and to display local products there so that it will attract the attention of all those who travel to that very popular location. Just as an aside, whatever, I thought was a good idea as a layman. What might have developed in that regard?
Thank you, member. And I have to follow up on that. I mean, we did have those discussions with the interested parties. Maybe I've kind of dropped the ball on that one.
Well, no, I understand from them that the discussions are ongoing.
But we have continued the discussions, and I will take it up back.
Yeah, it was the idea of displaying our products in the
Cologne free zone.
Yeah. So,
But to assure you that, as Mr. Harry Prasad indicated, and that's something for Vincent to follow up on, because we do now have a commercial office and a commercial office in Panama.
That's why I mentioned
and perhaps we'll ask Vincent to follow up that lead for us.
I have observed that the female population in Trinidad and Tobago as of December 2023 is 50.7%. No surprise. I thought it was more because their impact is so much greater. And I was telling the chairman with my recent introduction to concepts of, or the concept of women, peace and security, I have come to understand that whether in times of peace or in times of war, in the midst of natural disasters, the COVID challenge, and all of that, women in all societies of the world appear to bear the brunt, the largest share of the burdens that come with any circumstances, even war. And as a result of that consciousness, I am more than pleased to see that you all have introduced what you call ITC She Trades, focusing particularly on women and causing them to develop the acumen and to be involved in business in the context of your general ambitions. I saw you launch this in October of 2020, and you had a rollout of registration of women-owned businesses. I saw you conducted a needs assessment survey, and in 2021, you collected gender disaggregated data, and all these things heading towards greater participation of women in business with a view of improving Trinidad and Tobago's exports. I would like to hear how that has been going and where we are in that regard. Please.
Member, we too have discerned the important role of women, and in particular female entrepreneurship, in driving international trade. I do have right behind me the local expert in She Trades, and she's very excited about it because we have this conversation almost every day. So Candice, if you can share with the committee the work of the ITC project.
Thank you. And yes, with respect to the ITC She Trades platform and hub, I can advise now that we have 700 local women now on the platform, which we have moved just from 400 to 700 just within a matter of a year. And so we're constantly encouraging these women to come onto the platform. On the platform, you have two parts. You have both the international part of accessing training programs, accessing international events, participating in international trade shows, and through ExporTT, you have the local part where you can get training locally, physical, face-to-face training, and be able to build capacity in particular areas, whether it be into price negotiations, development of your product, developing export plans, etc. And through that, both channels, we have women participating in both of them. So we've taken women to particular trade shows, trade fairs. We've exposed them to, the requirements and all of the programs that ExporTT has to offer. are also offered to these women to help build their capacity. And through this, we've been able to see successes in terms of now we have women that are women-led businesses that are now exporting on their own in terms of building through that capacity building, but their niche products in some cases that they offer are now able to access particular regional markets. And we also have them participating in the Trade and Investment Promotion Convention that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, which has also seen huge success in these women having business-to-business meetings and being involved in the same type of inward buyers missions that we have, meeting with buyers and seeing what their opportunities are. Through that, we also have networking sessions. So last year we had a networking session coming out of COVID where we brought almost 400 women face-to-face, and they were able to discuss. And you saw where some were identified as mentors and others as mentees. So you have women that have advanced, have had access to international markets, have grown and expanded their businesses, and you have women now starting up, and they want to know how to overcome these challenges. And those mentors within the platform have been able to guide these particular women. And so we have another session coming up, of course, on International Women's Day on March 8th. We're going to have a seminar again, bringing these women to physically meet, discuss, interact, and be able to, again, influence each other. And coming out of that, too, we have a mentorship program that we're developing where we would ask particular women in the hub to lead as mentors to grow that cadre of women on the platform. And we also encourage women to continuously join the platform. So ExporTT, together with the Ministry of Trade, at every event with the TTMA, the Chamber of Business event, we encourage women to participate, to come onto the platform, to join, to benefit from the opportunities that are within that SheTrades platform.
Have we seen so far even a trickle of export trade
Of
coming
course.
out of it?
Yes, we have seen that exports, as I said, with these particularly the niche products.
Yes.
We have some of these women, they were already in, for instance, Massy stores or Excellent stores, so they have their products already there. And so they have been able to now advance because they are ready, and we've been able to develop particular export plans, and they have now been able to advance to the regional markets. So we have seen that growth, and we continue, and we expect to continue to see that growth with other women on the platform as well, accessing the programs.
If I can just add, one of the interesting phenomena associated or aspects of the ITC project, and up to this week I was thinking this were only exporters of goods. I went onto LinkedIn yesterday and I saw a local female lawyer who's in procurement and contract management, working in one of our top law firms here in Trinidad. She registered on the ITC SheTrades project, and through that project, she's going to the Abu Dhabi session next week. And they've chosen her, and the ITC is sponsoring her to provide contract and legal services. So it's not only export of goods, but export of services, and it's benefiting our small female entrepreneurs, but so many educated females that we have in Trinidad and Tobago in professional services.
A quick follow-up question on that. We've been speaking a lot about what I would call mortar and brick type things, where you bring the exporter to the importer and they meet physically and so on. But landscape may be very different in 10 years by way of AI and e-commerce and digitization and so on. So where is ExporTT in terms of strategically looking down the road and what it takes to bring people to market? Because more and more, probably all of us here probably don't even go down to High Street, Frederick Street to shop. We go on Amazon, we go on something. Once we know the brand and the style, we bring it in, and that has a very powerful hub for expanding commerce. So where are we in our little space in terms of that thinking?
Okay. So for now, transactions at a B2B level, it's still happening like face-to-face or calls. But on a B2C level, that is certainly the transformation that has taken place, where you see consumers buying more of their products online and having it shipped. These are discussions that we're having with our exporters on a regular basis, and the intention is, well, we do offer support, firstly, in terms of our co-financing facility to set up new websites and to ensure that those websites have e-commerce capabilities. If you have a website without e-commerce capabilities, you could still access our co-financing to get those capabilities on the site. So those are things that we offer. The issue after that now is the logistics. Because the thing is, if we have to ship to the US, and the US might be the likely market for a lot of our stuff if we're talking about exports, it's the matter of meeting the expectations of a customer. A customer there wants to have the product in their hand in 1 day or 2. So nothing is going to be shipping from Trinidad to try to arrive there. That is not going to meet their expectations. So what we are currently looking at is drop shipping or having warehousing facility and fulfillment centers that could provide the service. So you ship things in bulk across there, hold it, and then once the orders are received or triggered on the system, it can be shipped from there and meet those customer requirements. So those are some of the things that we look at. The B2B, for now, based on what I'm seeing, is people that want to look people in the eye and shake their hands and get that business done. That's generally how it's still conducted.
I would also add to that response that the Ministry of Trade and Industry only, I think it's less than a month ago, Candice, December, we signed an agreement with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, to develop a national e-commerce strategy for Trinidad and Tobago. Because we do, like you, understand that the medium of business, the delivery of goods and services in this digital economy is going to be in that area. And so it is an 8-month consultancy, and we are hoping by the end of the fiscal year or shortly thereafter, we would have a national e-commerce strategy for the country.
May I ask a few questions? I recognize that my colleagues, and I join them in complimenting ExporTT for the excellent work that they have been doing in seeking to penetrate export markets and getting a number of our citizens employed and on board. But I must tell you, there's an area or two I need to get some clarification on as it relates to the accounting aspect of ExporTT. Now, the first area I would like to have clarified. Could someone explain, and maybe Mrs. Benjamin could do so, why after, I would say 11 years, ExporTT having transitioned from Business Development Company Limited in October of 2012, why it is ExporTT has not transitioned to the international financial accounting standards? Why it is ExporTT still using this outdated, archaic manual to guide your accounting standards and principles? Can someone explain that to me? And we are talking about 2012. ExporTT came into existence. 2012, you operated a manual guidance or guidelines, business guidelines. Why it is we haven't transitioned? And when are you going to transition?
I would let the financial consultant respond because I think some clarification there is needed.
Sure, thank you. So ExporTT transitioning from 2012, from BDC in 2012 would have had a long-standing finance manager between 2012 to 2020. That finance manager would have been modifying the finance manual in use at that point in time. However, thereafter, he would have moved to retirement, and then the transformation of that manual ended up getting delayed at that point in time. Since then, we have been going through transitions of filling that role, and even with the announcement of the amalgamation, that has also been further delayed in streamlining and getting that manual updated. So that's really the short answer on that. However, in the interim of the manual not being updated, we have implemented stringent policies and processes and maintained the practices of the company in order to get an unqualified audit report to date. So that would also show the strength as well on our end to maintain the financial and business processes to its current status.
Well, you may have had an unqualified submission to date. We haven't had access to nothing after 2018. What is before this committee is 2018. And what we are dealing with is what has happened as it relates to why it is ExporTT has not been able to do the following. Have a general manager responsible for finance employed with a staff of 51, a budget of 15 million. And to compound the matter, no internal auditors. And from what I'm seeing on the record, as they come in, they go out. I'm seeing on your record an internal auditor coming in 2021, by 22, gone. One coming in 2023, January, September, gone. What is happening to your internal audit function, which is critically important for governance, for risk management, for internal controls? What is happening? Can someone from ExporTT explain to this committee why you cannot keep an internal auditor? And when are you going to engage an internal auditor? Who can answer that?
Yes, Chair, I would attempt to answer that for you. So one of the things that ExporTT is constrained by is the salary. So actually right now we're before the industrial court for the collective bargaining agreement 2019 to 2023, I believe. So our salaries are not the best. That's one. So in the first instance where you're seeing the person stayed about a year, she got a better opportunity and moved on. Since the announcement of the amalgamation, we are unable to hire in a permanent capacity. So a 3-month contract is not attractive to anybody. What ExporTT is like with HR now is like a stop measure. Until I get something permanent, I'm going to come. So that is why you're seeing that movement. We are not because of the salary, and we cannot offer permanent. Nobody wants to come really and work with us. That's why we are here where we are. But for the staff members, and a lot, probably about 90% of them have been with ExporTT over 10 years. We are here to stay. But it's the new people. They don't have anything invested to stay. I'm going to stay with ExporTT and see what the TIPA brings. They're not going to do that because there's no security.
Okay. But, Permanent Secretary, Trade and Industry and Finance Investments Division, given the importance of the role of an internal auditor, what kind of initiatives have been taken to help ExporTT have a permanent internal auditor placed on staff, even on contract, at a reasonable salary to ensure proper governance, risk management, and proper internal controls? Can the permanent secretary answer that for me? And I would like to get some responses from the Ministry of Finance, because this is tarnishing your reputation. This absence of an auditor and the absence of a permanent financial manager, these two vacancies that exist must be filled. And I can't see a transition taking place and your mash breaks. So when your mash breaks, what is happening is that you may get some surprises coming up in your audit reports because of the weaknesses of your internal controls, which, as you are saying, Mrs. Benjamin, you are somewhat constrained to employ people on two bases: short term, because the transition, and the other aspect is the poor salary level that is not keeping people. So this is something that we need to address, Mr. Karam, your internal audit function. So can you give us some explanation and what action can be taken by trade and industry to fill this gap almost with some degree of urgency, given what is taking place?
Thank you, Chairman. And we too share your identical concerns. My understanding is that the auditor was last there in October, I believe, October 2023. Maria, right?
Yes.
So
It was October.
that's 3 months ago. We understand the importance of having a proper internal audit and function within any organization. As Maria indicated, there have been issues with respect to the recruitment of persons on a sustainable basis. Given your direction, we will have that discussion coming out of the committee to see what interim measure that we can immediately put in place to fill that need, especially as we transition towards TIPA. In the new organization, we are hoping that, we are confident that given the organizational structure and the compensation that will go with the new positions, that this should not be an issue that would exist. But we do take your very solid point that it is important to fill the gap immediately so that we don't end up in any issues, legacy issues. So I give the undertaking as Permanent Secretary for the Line Ministry to have that discussion with ExporTT and to address that matter.
The other thing that caught my attention was this Baker-Tilly management letter of 2018. Remember, we are dealing with 2018 audited financial accounts because we don't have any other account before us. I don't know who deals with finances right now within ExporTT. Is it the consultant? Okay. I just want to ask the question. I have a management letter. I don't know if you have a copy of it. You should have. This is for 2018 accounts I'm dealing with here. And this is dated January 20th, 2023. But we are dealing with, of course, your 2018 accounts. And it is being sent to you in 2023. The heading is check signatories. Again, Mr. Karim, I have to say that because of the absence and this revolving door, internal auditors come in, one door, they're going through another door. Then you have a financial manager absent since 2021. And we are in 2024. The decision to merge these companies took place in 2023 through the Minister of Finance's statement in Parliament. But since 2021, there has been no financial manager at ExporTT. Why? And what does it have to do with transition? It may have to do something, as Mrs. Benjamin said, with salaries and what is being offered. But that is a matter for the Ministry of Trade and the Ministry of Finance Investment Division to work out with ExporTT to get the right personnel in place to ensure that the finances that are located are being properly accounted for. That is the issue. Now, hear this alarming statement, Mr. Karim and Mr. Hari Prasad and Madam Benjamin. I want to quote. This is the auditor speaking on page 5, I think, page 4. He's saying, observations. In our review of the cash and bank process, we observed several instances. He didn't say one, huh? He didn't say 2. He didn't say 3. Several. So we don't know if it's 10, 20, 15, 30, Mr. Karim. We don't know. Instances where checks were signed by personnel not included on the list of authorized signatories which was provided to us, and authorized personnel were signing checks above their authorized limits. He goes on further to say, in both circumstances, these checks were honored by the bank. Now, explain to this committee how people at ExporTT with no authority to sign checks, signing checks. That is one aspect. The second aspect, those who have authority to sign checks, Mr. Karim, Mr. Hari Prasad, Mrs. Benjamin, they are signing checks over and above their authorized limit. So they are authorized to sign checks for 10,000. They are signing checks for 15,000, 20,000, 30,000. We don't know. And you know what is even more alarming? The banks are accepting these huge amounts, not only of people who are not authorized to sign checks. These banks are accepting unauthorized individuals, but even those who are authorized to sign, they are signing above the limit. Now, I would like to know what action has been taken by ExporTT. And are these people still on the job? Can someone explain to this committee? And you see why, Mr. Karim, we have this problem with internal auditing? You see why the absence of internal auditing function. You see where we have ended up? With an auditor, Mr. McClatchy, telling us in a letter dated January the 20th, 2023, dealing with accounts for 2018, not 19, not 20, not 21, not 22, not 23. If these things are happening in 2018 at ExporTT, tell me what's going on in 2019. What's going on in 2020? What's going on in 2021? Look,
Chair, if I may.
I need to get, you see, this thing have me a bit concerned. And the reason why I'm raising this, taxpayers' money is serious business.
Yes.
And all I'm saying, there is something going on at ExporTT that you might be aware of.
Right.
Mr. Karim is not aware of. Mr. Hari Prasad is not aware of. But it is going on. And we need to get from ExporTT personnel, both board of directors and management, in light of these, because you must have seen this report. You must have seen this report from the auditors. And you must know that from 2019, no financial audited accounts have been submitted. So could you explain to this committee what is going on and what action you would recommend be taken to address these matters? Because we would like to be guided by you in the first instance before we take action.
Sure. Well, you'll be happy to know the 2020 management letter is before me here, and that does not find its way inside of there. If I remember correctly, from that 2020 audit, there were 2 banking and signing resolutions in the same year. So a decision was taken with a list of signatories, and at some point in the same year, another decision was taken. But the first set of individuals were not advised of the second change, and so continued because the instrument that was presented to them said, you are authorized until so told to sign checks on behalf of the organization. So they continued to sign. So that's why you're seeing where they saying persons in the first instance who were not authorized to sign was signing. With regard to the exceeding of the limits, I'm not sure if the financial consultant remembers what was the scenario about that one, but I know for sure with regard to persons who were not authorized to signing was because there were 2 resolutions, changes taken place in the same financial period.
But how often, what is the practice in terms of when someone is authorized by the management to sign or the board of directors to sign? What is the time frame normally given to a person? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Or is it, for instance, for a period that is indefinite? Because I am intrigued to learn that in 1 year, you can tell me to sign through a resolution, and then I am signing. And then a second resolution comes up saying Rushton Paré is now to sign. Nobody tells me that I am no longer to sign.
Yes.
So I am signing.
Yes.
So what is going on? What is going on at ExporTT? So the right hand doesn't know the left hand is doing. Nobody is checking where the checks and balances. Look, there's a breakdown in ExporTT. Mr. Karim, you're the permanent secretary and you oversee that organization. And the Ministry of Finance, overall responsible for this operation. There's a breakdown because this is not making sense whatsoever. There is something that is happening there, and I am asking the permanent secretary to look into this thing. This is what we have before us. We would like is submission, a report to be submitted to this committee to explain what has occurred, what action have been taken, and what measures have been effected to ensure that these things do not reoccur in the organization. As I said, we don't have 2019 up to 2023, so we can't speak to those years, but we can speak certainly for 2018. So that is an area we want to get some reports on, or a report on from the permanent secretary and also the ExporTT, because ExporTT is before us. But we know the line ministry that oversees ExporTT is in fact the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Now, may I ask the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, are you aware of this management letter of 2018 dated January 20th, 2023 on the 2018 accounts? And that, listen, there are many things, Mr. Karim, that the auditor points out to in terms of weaknesses and deficiencies in the internal controls. All I have done is to bring to your attention one aspect, but there are several, there are 6 pages of material here. I only dealt with one aspect of these 6 pages. So I would like the Ministry of Finance to explain to this committee whether they are aware of this, and can you intervene and guide us on this matter, please?
So, Chair, I'm not aware of the management letter that you're talking about here, but we will follow through on it, and we will look to see what is management's comments and with respect to the weakness that we identified.
How often and how often, like, these matters would come to your attention, and over what period of time? Especially when you have matters that are so concerning. Would not the Ministry of Trade and ExporTT have a responsibility to communicate with the Ministry of Finance Investment Division with some degree of alacrity, so that, for instance, you could be aware that something is not going proper or something is not occurring consistent with standards, and therefore you can offer them some advice? Is there any period of time, or that is discretionary?
So usually we will get the audited financial statements. The management letter usually goes to the company, which is what identifies the weaknesses and what areas that the company need to address. So it will not come to us as the shareholder. We will get, companies are required to submit internal audit reports that come. If we find any shortcomings there, we will address it in those reports. But that will not be in any management letter. We will get internal audit reports that are done by the internal audit.
Yeah. All right.
Chair, if I may add as well, just to let you know that when that management letter came to our attention, some of the practices we've put in place since then is to circulate the board resolutions to the signatory, so they were reminded these are your limits. There are some accounts where one director must sign, one level 1 or a level 1 and a level 2 within the organization, and it was also resent to the bank as well too. So they are aware. So I don't have the 2019 management letter before me, as I said, but definitely in the 2020 management letter, for which we are doing the AGM tomorrow, that matter does not make its way into this audit.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that you may have improved, but we don't have that
the information
before us.
Yeah. Sure.
What we have before us is exactly 2018.
Right.
So all I'm saying is that something happened in that year that forced the audit. And what is even interesting, I would say, why did it take the auditor 5 years?
Remember, that's with the change in the auditors, right? So 2018 was the first audit, Anna? that Baker Tilly did for us? Right. So that's when we had to change from the past auditor to the new auditor. So 2018 was the first audit that Baker Tilly did for us. So since then, they've done 19 and 20 and about to start 2021.
Who was your first auditor?
That would be Deloitte and Touche.
And they left for what reason? Was that a decision of the AGM to, after 3 years, you get rid of them? Or were they weren't performing and what was the reason?
Anand, are you able to share? If I understand correctly, they were the audit company that didn't complete the audit. So the documents were submitted, but I don't know if it was a timing issue and we were not prioritized, but time was going and the audit was not getting done. And so a decision at some point was taken that we need to find a new auditor. And we went through the procurement process, getting the top 3, selecting one, making the recommendations to Ministry of Finance, getting the approval and starting the audits.
Chair, all right. Chair, if I may add,
yes.
The Ministry of Trade would have received the management letter you spoke to on Monday in preparations for this sitting of the PAC. We have had discussions with ExporTT because, of course, as the permanent secretary, the first question I ask is, is this still a relevant issue? And they have produced a report to the ministry on what exactly occurred. And of course, as you have asked, we will put it in writing before the PAC. We did note, however, in page 44 of their submission, that which is before the committee, that when the issue was identified, the bank was notified of the inconsistencies, right. and that is before the committee. But unfortunately, the committee does not have the 2019 management letter that Ms. Benjamin spoke to, which did not flag those inconsistencies in 2018. But obviously, something did not go well in the year 2018. Administratively, and we have been assured by the company through written reports that those issues have been dealt with, which we will put in writing to the committee.
All right, cool. Well, as I said, our responsibility is to ensure that what comes before us, we interrogate and we get answers. Yes. Okay? And that is why we have asked you, put it in writing, right, and submit it to this committee. The final area, Mr. Karim, I want to raise, dealing with trade. We know that CARIFORUM and the ACP, well, CARIFORUM, ACP, whatever you call them, and the European Union, we understand, and guide me on this one, that there's a 25-year period when Europe, we can export as part of CARIFORUM to the European Union through their markets, products at very low tariffs. Guide me if I'm wrong on that. And after 25 years, the European Union will now be able to export to Trinidad and Tobago at very low tariff their products. That's what I understand. Guide me as to whether that is a fact or not, and by 2033, that process is supposed to kick in. From a trade perspective, do you think we are readying ourselves for such a transition, given the competitivity that would mean, and what impact you anticipate that would have on our economy, given the relative prices that would be at play in this instance? You could guide me on this one? Because I'm not too sure, but I'm getting that information, and I thought I should raise it with you.
Chairman, the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement, as you indicated, I believe it's 2008 or 2009 the agreement was signed. Yeah. The It does have within it, of course, like any trade agreement, a tariff reduction schedule for both sides. And the purpose of an agreement is to implement the obligations of the agreement, right? You may wish to know that the agreement is not yet in force in Trinidad and Tobago, so it does not have the force of domestic law, because there are some outstanding issues that we are dealing with bilaterally with the European Union in respect of doing some corrections to the tariff lines. But the 25-year period is running because, of course, and that's a legal issue. We are working very closely with the EU on a series of bilateral initiatives to not only boost our exports to the EU, and we do have a lot of favorable trade statistics. We are not at all fearful of the reciprocal trade, because we see the agreement as in total as one that is advantageous to the economy. With trade agreements, you get the opportunity to export out, and of course the other side gets the opportunity to export to you. But we do see the agreement as a whole as one that will be beneficial and continue to be beneficial. So that is my short answer to the question, but we could delve a little more deeper in a written response.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Rushton.
Thank you, Chair. And I know we're running perilously close to the end of, but I have two very quick questions. Are we maximizing our CBI allocation for duty-free entry into American markets in terms of our manufacturers? Are we maximizing that, or there is some play still that that we can utilize in terms of driving our exports into the U.S. markets?
Yeah. I recently had a discussion with some representatives from the U.S. about this particular matter, and I think they estimated roughly about 20% of shipments that were being done that have not been utilizing the agreement.
So is there a focus to look at driving that, since we have duty-free entry into those markets? Yeah.
So I think the intention is to identify those persons through the export. If we look through the export data, we'll see who those companies are, and then bring it to their attention that they could complete the self-certification process to access that duty-free. Yeah.
What I would add, member, is because Trinidad and Tobago is the largest beneficiary of the CBI, and if you look at and it's available on the U.S. Congress's website, the Cabrera report, they always flag us as one of the largest exporters under that preferential program. What Dan Raj may not know is one of the reasons why there's that untapped potential is you have to understand that the U.S. MFN rate is already zero or negligible in most instances. So quite a significant portion of our exports to the U.S. market already going in duty-free outside the CBI, because the U.S. is already offering that to the rest of the world. So when you look at it, you really have to dig deeper into the trade data to understand that it's not so much an untapped potential, because by and large, the vast majority of the tariff lines that we are allowed to export to the U.S. market is being exported to the extent that you have a local production capacity. But there are some areas, admittedly, and ExporTT has identified those areas.
Let me ask you this. Last year when the Prime Minister was in Canada at the Canada CARICOM Summit, the issue about the CCCT, which is the Commonwealth Caribbean countries tariff, where you have some duty-free access into the Canadian market, specifically for clothing and apparel, right? And I'm looking at the vast jumps that you're making with the SHE program, and I suspect some sort of clothing and manufacturing happening there. Is there any focus in that grouping being able to get into that Canadian market because of the preferential requirement for duty-free access for specifically apparels? Is that something that you're looking at?
Yes. Can carry pen.
Yeah. Well, he's speaking. Remember, you're speaking specifically about apparel and
yeah,
textile.
because I think the duty-free access on that arrangement is specifically for textiles and apparel.
So
and I'm just trying to make a connection to the SHE program where you have some production in those areas.
So there are multiple agreements, and the main agreement would be the CARICOM agreement that grants duty-free access for the Caribbean into the Canadian market. And it covers most products, probably with the exception of those products that has a separate arrangement for it. It's not dissimilar from the CBI that has a special treatment of apparel and textiles as well. Right, so what we do is we would utilize mostly on the Caribbean side that covers many more products, or most products, I should say, that are manufactured in Trinidad and Tobago. That is an area that we could specifically look at. We could speak with our colleagues from ExporTT, as they have that particular mandate in terms of working with all our entrepreneurs and companies within that sector of fashion and apparel.
Okay, just very quickly as well. In terms of the recently where we had the launch, I think, of the first batch of the suitcase manufacturer that's in the Phoenix Park area, and from the numbers that we saw, I think the numbers were favorable, and looking at the fact that that manufacturing industry is a huge billion-dollar market. Now, in government policy, they have identified, if I would recall, that they are planning to not only continue developing that park, but looking at additional parks throughout the country. Now, I want to place something here for consideration, because as being the MP for a constituency where we do have a high amount of underutilized resources in terms of land space, and when you look at the entire country, our unemployment rate of skilled and semi-skilled labor, because of the fallout of the energy sector, we are 10 points ahead of the national average, whereas the national average is about 4% unemployment. We are 13.5%. Now, consider this. If part of the Ministry of Trade and its ability to look at creating these export zones similar to Phoenix Park, perhaps consideration can be made to look at somewhere in the southeastern side of the island, where you can solve two problems. One, create an opportunity for manufacturing in an agro-based community. We're close to a port that is highly active and commercially available, and you can absorb that high amount of skilled and semi-skilled labor that is idle at this time because of the fallout of the energy sector. So I think it speaks well to the, if you were to lump everything in, how do we push the non-energy market? Even the labor from that market can be used as well. Because I'm seeing if we can get some benefit, as we see on that suitcase manufacturing company, and, we wait to see what are the other players. I know Minister had said that, there are lots of agreements that have been signed and they're waiting for execution. But if the government wants to pursue these additional parks, perhaps some consideration can be done. Just as I said, because you can solve a number of problems on the southeastern side of the island, and we're close to a port for exports.
Yes, we at the ministry do share your enthusiasm on that area. Because incidentally, I was the one who was at the launch of the Summit luggage. And again, that for the first time in Trinidad and Tobago, suitcase, premium suitcase is being manufactured in this country, and luggage that will be internationally branded. We know the brand Samsonite, and it's really an important development for our manufacturing sector, because part of growing exports is being able to not only export the same thing over and over, but export new and innovative products. As you speak to your suggestion on recommendation for the development of the Southwestern Peninsula is one that we... Southeastern Peninsula is... but I live in Sangre Grande, so I'm technically the neighbor to Mayaro, right? And you would be pleased to know, and the committee, that before the Parliament right now is the Special Economic Zones regulations, which have been laid in both houses. And we do envisage that through that legislation, the Special Economic Zones Act and the regulations, that will usher in, for the first time in the country, a new wave of investment, not only state-led investment in economic zones, but also the legislation envisages and seeks to promote private sector investment in special economic zones, one of which will be development zones specifically targeted to communities like Mayaro and those where you have that large banks of skilled labor. But we will take your suggestion back to, of course, the ministry, and to look at, because we are very eager to work with stakeholders across the board to identify new sites and possibilities for zones.
Last question, Chair, before I finish. So we're looking at over the next 4 or 5 years, I guess, in terms of pushing these zones, getting new manufacturers. Is the ministry looking at the fact that Europe, North America, Canada, they are looking to put some stamp on the quality of products coming into their area with low carbon footprint,
right,
with issues of, how do you make these products? We have a hydrogen market that's going to come on stream in the next 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And the vendors or the purchasers for those products is going to look for green energy and green manufacturing. Mm-hmm. Is the Ministry of Trade looking at, in future developments of this park, that the partners that are going to come in, that they maintain or they have some sort of carbon management footprint? Because if they're manufacturing products and they can't get into the European market, can't get into the US market because they don't have some sort of notification that, produced under green specifications and so on, then we may be in for a bit of problems. Have the ministry been looking at any of that future type of what is the next level of production, manufacturing coming in terms of low carbon footprints in terms of the manufacturing process?
Yes, and remember, this is the whole trend globally to where the demand for low carbon goods and services we are monitoring very closely. We have seen the developments in the EU Parliament with the regulations relating to the carbon border mechanism that is now demanding that goods entering the EU market have a particular carbon footprint. And we spoke, I think we touched on it earlier, where we spoke to the facility that ExporTT is pushing with respect to green packaging, green labeling. Next month, you will be pleased to know that the Ministry of Trade and Industry will be launching something called the Green Manufacturing Initiative. This is something that has been approved by Cabinet, and where we will be offering grant funding to companies across the board, whether it's manufacturing or services, to do exactly that. Look at their production processes, look at their packaging, look at their utility systems, their wastewater management systems, all in a goal to produce more green goods and services. We do have within the regulations that the whole a very strong component dealing with the environmental aspects, because we too want to jump on that wave, right? Because at the end of the day, in the next 5-10 years, that's all you're going to be able to export from Trinidad and Tobago in the energy sector and in the non-energy sector, and we are very much paying close attention and responding to those needs.
Yes, well, may I? At this time, we are going to bring our proceedings, this inquiry, to a close. But before doing so, I would like to invite Mr. Karim to say a few words on behalf of the team, all the officials here, and we will then conclude our inquiry. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. The Ministry of Trade and Industry is very pleased to appear before the committee. I think we had a very good discussion, and we are glad that through the committee, the national community has been exposed to some of the work of ExporTT. This is an organization that strives to continue to improve on the products and services that they offer. Like any organization, there are issues that come up, and certainly the committee has identified some of those weaknesses. And we are comforted at the ministry that they are looking at those issues. We do give the commitment that we will continue to work with ExporTT through the transition process to a new trade and investment promotion agency, ultimately to realize those goals and ambitions which members of the committee have so rightly articulated, which is to grow the non-energy export sector of the economy for the benefits of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So we thank you.
Yeah, well, again, let me, on behalf of our committee, Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, also extend our thanks and appreciation. And what I would like to also recommend for consideration to ExporTT, Ministry of Trade and Industry, and even the Finance Ministry, if there are suggestions, recommendations that you would like us to consider in seeking to strengthen ExporTT. Remember, our committee here is our presence is to help. We want to make ExporTT more efficient, more effective, more economical in terms of your operations as you seek to deliver services to your clients. So I would like to recommend for your consideration the submission of recommendations, Mr. Hari Prasad and Mr. Karim, to our committee through our secretary for consideration. So when we are doing our final report for submission to the House of Representatives, we'll have your input as it relates to ways and means that we can recommend to the Parliament ways and means of strengthening ExporTT. So I'd like you to take that on board and submit your recommendations to our secretary. So again, on behalf of our committee, we'd like to thank you for coming here. That is, first of all, Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, and of course, ExporTT and their respective officials. So thank you, and we now suspend these proceedings to allow our colleagues to take their leave. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.